Vara Station floated in the darkness of space like a giant wheel made of metal and glass. Ships from 100 different worlds came and went through its docking bays every day. Inside the station, aliens of every shape and size walked together through wide corridors filled with shops, restaurants, and meeting halls. It was neutral ground, a place where peace was the only law that mattered. Lieutenant D1 Kim stepped off his transport ship and looked around. He had seen many strange things in his 28 years, but Vara Station still amazed him. Creatures with 6 legs walked past beings made of living crystal. Traders shouted in languages that sounded like music or grinding stones. The air smelled like a mixture of exotic spices and engine fuel. D1 wore his Earth Defense Force uniform, the dark blue fabric crisp and clean. He was here for a diplomatic exchange program, meant to learn how other species train their pilots. Earth was still new to the galactic community, and every human sent out was an ambassador of sorts. He made his way through the crowds toward the pilot's quarter, where military personnel from various worlds gathered. The corridor opened into a large common area with high ceilings and windows that showed the stars beyond. Groups of alien pilots stood around talking, comparing stories, and showing off their flight records on holographic displays. D1 found an empty table and sat down. He pulled out his data pad to review the training schedule when a loud voice cut through the noise of the room. "Another human pilot. They keep sending you weak ones here like we're supposed to be impressed." D1 looked up. A tall alien woman stood a few meters away, surrounded by a group of her people. She had pale blue skin covered in intricate patterns that looked like tribal tattoos. Her eyes were large and golden, with vertical pupils like a cat. Long white hair fell down her back in a thick braid. She wore armor made from some kind of dark leather, decorated with bones and feathers. The woman was Natai, D1 realized. He had read about them during his journey here. They came from a world of floating mountains and endless skis. Their people were famous across the galaxy as the greatest natural pilots, but not because they flew ships. The Natai bonded with flying creatures called Ikrans, massive winged predators that they rode through their planet's dangerous atmosphere. "I'm Lieutenant D1 Kim," he said calmly, standing up. "I'm here to learn, not to impress anyone." The Natai woman laughed, a sharp sound that made several other aliens turn to watch. "Learn? What can you possibly learn? You humans hide inside your metal machines because you're too afraid to really fly. You have no connection to the sky, no bond with a living creature. You just push buttons and pretend you're pilots." Other Natai in the room moved closer, interested in the confrontation. D1 noticed they all had the same proud bearing, the same confident way of moving. They were predators, he realized, just like the creatures they rode. "Flying a ship requires skill," D1 said, keeping his voice level. "Navigation, spatial awareness, split-second decisions under pressure. Those things matter whether you're in a cockpit or on the back of an animal." The woman's golden eyes narrowed. She stepped closer and D1 saw that she was taller than him by at least 15 centimeters. "Animal? You call an Ikran an animal? They are noble creatures born of wind and storm. They choose their riders. They share their souls with us. What does your cold machine share with you? Nothing but the emptiness of your own inadequacy." A crowd was forming now. Pilots from other species moved closer to watch and listen. Some looked amused, others uncomfortable. Humans were still strange to many of them, still unproven in the eyes of older galactic civilizations. "I meant no disrespect," D1 said. "But bonding with a creature doesn't make you superior to pilots who use technology. Different methods, same goal, we all fly." The Natai woman's laugh was colder this time. "You think sitting in a chair equals riding an Ikran. You think your simulators and training programs can match the bond of Sky Brothers." She turned to address the growing crowd. "This human claims pilots are all equal, no matter what they fly. Shall we test this claim?" Murmurs ran through the watching aliens. D1 felt a knot forming in his stomach, but he kept his face calm. He had dealt with challenges before, back on Earth, back in training, back in combat situations where lives depended on keeping his cool. "What kind of test?" he asked. The Natai woman smiled, showing teeth that were just a bit too sharp. "My name is Velrissa, daughter of storm riders bonded to Shreeth the Sky Terror. If you're a real pilot as you claim, then prove it. Ride my Ikran, form the Sky Bond. Show us that human pilots are worthy of respect." The crowd erupted in noise. Some laughed, others gasped. A few shouted encouragement or warnings in languages D1 didn't understand. He saw other humans in the crowd now, their faces worried. One of them, a woman with captain's bars on her uniform, was shaking her head urgently at him. D1 thought about the challenge. He knew nothing about Ikrans except what he had read in briefing files. They were dangerous, aggressive, and bonded to their riders through some kind of neural connection that took years to develop. The Natai trained from childhood to earn the right to even approach one. But he also thought about his childhood on Earth, on the small settlement where he had grown up. He remembered working with wild horses that everyone said were unrideable. He remembered training with hawks and falcons, learning their moods, understanding their signals. He remembered his grandfather teaching him that all creatures, no matter how different, shared certain basic truths about fear, trust, and respect. "I accept," D1 said. The room exploded with noise again. Velrissa's smile grew wider, more predatory. "You humans are either very brave or very stupid. We'll see which one you are when you meet Shreeth." She turned and walked toward the exit, her followers moving with her. The crowd began to disperse, already spreading news of the challenge through the station's communication networks. The human captain pushed through the remaining aliens and grabbed D1's arm. "Are you insane? Do you know what you just agreed to? Natai Ikrans have killed people who tried to ride them without proper training. This isn't a game, Lieutenant." D1 looked at her calmly. "I know, Captain, but she challenged human pilots in front of representatives from a dozen worlds. If I refuse now, it reflects badly on all of us. Better to try and fail than to not try at all." The captain studied his face for a long moment, then sighed. "You really think you can do this?" D1 thought about the horses and the hawks, about years of learning to read body language and build trust with creatures that could kill him with a single kick or talon strike. He thought about his training as a combat pilot, about staying calm under pressure, about adapting to new situations quickly. "I think I have to try," he said. The Ikran sanctuary was located in the outermost ring of Vara Station, where the gravity was lighter and the ceiling soared 30 meters high. Massive windows showed the blackness of space beyond, but inside, the designers had created something that felt almost natural. Artificial trees grew from the floor, their branches spreading wide. Platforms hung from cables, creating different levels for the creatures to perch on. The air was warm and humid, pumped full of gases that the Ikrans needed to breathe comfortably. D1 stood at the entrance with Velrissa and at least 20 other Natai. Word of the challenge had spread quickly, and it seemed like every Natai on the station had come to watch. They talked among themselves in their own language, which sounded like wind whistling through caves. Their golden eyes watched him with expressions that ranged from amusement to contempt. "Second thoughts, human?" Velrissa asked. She had changed into riding gear, leather straps and padded armor that looked worn from years of use. "Just taking it in," D1 replied. He was studying the sanctuary, looking for details. He saw scratches on the artificial trees, marking territory. He noticed the way the light was arranged to create shadows and bright spots, giving the creatures places to hide or sun themselves. Everything about this place was designed to make Ikrans feel at home. Velrissa made a sharp clicking sound with her tongue. From somewhere high above, something moved. D1 looked up and felt his breath catch in his throat. The Ikran descended from the shadows like a nightmare-given form. It was massive, easily 4 meters long from nose to tail. Its body was lean and muscular, covered in scales that shifted between deep blue and purple depending on how the light hit them. 4 wings spread from its back, each one tipped with a curved claw. Its head was narrow and angular, with a jaw that could probably bite through steel. But the eyes were what caught D1's attention. They were intelligent, calculating, and currently focused on him with clear hostility. The creature landed on a platform 5 meters away with enough force to make the entire structure shake. It opened its mouth and made a sound that was half roar and half screech, showing rows of teeth designed for tearing meat. "This is Shreeth," Velrissa said proudly. "My sky brother, my soul bond. He has been with me for 12 years since I completed my first storm ride as a child. He has killed 3 people who approached him without my permission. He is aggressive, powerful, and loyal only to me." The Natai around them murmured approval. D1 noticed they kept their distance from Shreeth, even though many of them had their own Ikrans. This was clearly a dangerous animal by any standard. "How does the bonding work?" D1 asked. His voice was steady, but his heart was beating faster. Everything about Shreeth screamed danger. The creature's muscles were tense, ready to spring. Its tail whipped back and forth in agitation. Velrissa smiled. "The sky bond is earned through dominance. You must approach Shreeth and connect to the neural cue on the back of his head, but he will fight you. You must prove your strength, your courage, your right to ride. You must master him with your will and your body. Only then will he accept you." She gestured to the back of Shreeth's head, where D1 could now see thin tendrils moving slowly, like underwater plants in a current. They glowed faintly with bioluminescence. "That's the neural connection point?" he asked. "Yes, but you'll never reach it. Shreeth will tear you apart first." Velrissa didn't sound concerned about this possibility. "Unless you wish to withdraw, no one would blame a human for lacking the courage to face an Ikran." D1 ignored her. He was watching Shreeth carefully, cataloging everything he saw. The way the creature's weight shifted from foot to foot, the angle of its head, the position of its wings. He had worked with dangerous animals before, predators that could kill him easily if he made a mistake. The first rule was always the same: understand what you're dealing with before you act. "I need time," he said. "Time?" Velrissa looked confused. "Time for what?" "To observe, to learn, to understand Shreeth's behavior patterns." D1 pulled out his data pad and started making notes. The Natai erupted in laughter. One of them, a large male with silver markings on his face, spoke up in heavily accented galactic common. "The human thinks he can learn the sky bond from a computer. This is why they will never be true pilots." More laughter, but D1 kept watching Shreeth, ignoring the crowd. He noticed something interesting. When the Natai laughed loudly, Shreeth's head swiveled toward them. His pupils narrowed, his wings twitched. The creature was stressed by the noise and the crowd. "When does the bonding attempt happen?" D1 asked. "Tomorrow," Velrissa said. "We'll give you 1 night to prepare, to pray, to say goodbye to your loved ones." She paused. "Or to run away like a coward." "Tomorrow then," D1 agreed. "But I want to spend today here watching Shreeth, alone if possible." Velrissa's golden eyes narrowed. "Why?" "Because that's how you learn about any creature. You observe, you study, you understand before you act." D1 met her gaze steadily. "Unless you're afraid I'll discover something you don't want me to know." That hit a nerve. Velrissa's pride flared in her eyes. "Fine, stay here all day if you want. Watch Shreeth. Learn nothing. Tomorrow you'll fail just the same." She turned to the other Natai. "Leave the human to his foolish observations. We have better things to do." The group left, their laughter echoing through the sanctuary. But D1 noticed that Velrissa looked back once before she disappeared through the door. There was something in her expression he couldn't quite read. Doubt, curiosity, he wasn't sure. When they were gone, D1 found a comfortable spot and sat down. Shreeth watched him suspiciously from the platform above. The Ikran made a low rumbling sound, somewhere between a growl and a purr. A warning. I know, D1 said quietly. I'm in your territory, I'm a threat. You don't trust me and you're ready to fight if I come closer. He settled into a more relaxed posture, making himself smaller, less threatening. But I'm not here to fight you, Shrith. I'm here to understand you. The Ikran tilted its head, studying him. Then it spread its wings in a display meant to intimidate. D1 didn't flinch. He just kept watching, his data pad recording everything. Hours passed. D1 watched as Shrith moved around the sanctuary, marking territory, hunting the small drone creatures that the station staff released as food. He noticed patterns. Shrith always checked certain perches before settling down. He avoided bright lights. When he ate, he turned his back to the wall, protecting himself from potential attacks. The Ikran was intelligent and cautious, but he was also agitated. His movements were too sharp, too quick. He startled at small sounds. His tail never stopped moving. This was not a calm, content creature. This was an animal under constant stress. D1 made more notes. He compared what he saw to things he had read about Earth predators. The behaviors were similar: territorial aggression, defensive posturing, hypervigilance. Shrith reminded him of horses that had been broken rather than trained, animals that obeyed out of fear rather than trust. As evening approached, a door opened and a human woman entered. She was tall and slim, with short black hair and the kind of practical clothing scientists wore. She carried a medical kit and a data pad. "Lieutenant Kim," she called out softly. "Here," D1 replied, standing up. She approached carefully, keeping her movements slow. Shrith watched her but didn't react aggressively. "I'm Dr. Hae-Jin Park, xenobiologist. I heard about your challenge. That was either very brave or very stupid." "I get that a lot," D1 said with a slight smile. Hae-Jin glanced at Shrith, then back at D1. "I've been studying Ikran neurology for 2 years. If you're serious about trying to bond with that creature, I might be able to help." She held up her data pad. "I have scans, biological data, behavioral analysis, stuff the Nati don't like to share because they see it as sacred knowledge." "Why help me?" D1 asked. "Because I'm tired of the Nati acting like they're the only species that can bond with animals. Humans have been doing it for thousands of years." Hae-Jin's eyes were intense. "We just do it differently, better in some ways." D1 gestured to Shrith. "Tell me everything you know." The next morning, the Ikran sanctuary was packed with observers. Word had spread beyond just the Nati. Now there were pilots from a dozen different species crowded around the entrance, trying to get a good view. Station security had to set up barriers to keep people from getting too close. Holographic cameras floated in the air, recording everything for those who couldn't attend in person. D1 stood at the entrance in simple clothing, light and flexible. He had refused the protective armor that Velrissa offered. It would only slow him down and send the wrong message to Shrith. Everything he had learned yesterday, everything Dr. Hae-Jin Park had told him, led to one conclusion. The Nati method of bonding was based on dominance and force. It worked, but it created stressed, aggressive bonds. The Ikrans obeyed out of submission, not partnership. D1 planned to try something different. "Are you ready, human?" Velrissa stood nearby in her riding gear, arms crossed. She looked confident, but D1 had noticed her glancing at Shrith several times with an expression he couldn't quite read. Shrith is particularly aggressive this morning. Perhaps he senses fresh meat. The crowd of Nati laughed. But there were other voices now too, humans from the station who had come to watch one of their own. D1 saw Dr. Park in the crowd, her face tight with worry. The human captain he had met yesterday stood beside her, looking like she was about to witness an execution. "I'm ready," D1 said calmly. He walked into the sanctuary alone. Behind him, the barriers sealed shut. Safety protocol in case Shrith decided to attack the crowd instead of just him. The Ikran was perched on his favorite platform, the high one with the view of the stars. His 4 wings were spread slightly, his head lowered in an aggressive posture. The tendrils on the back of his skull glowed a deep red color. Dr. Park had explained that meant heightened emotional state, ready for conflict. The crowd outside grew quiet. Everyone watched to see what would happen. D1 didn't move toward Shreth. Not yet. Instead, he walked to a different area of the sanctuary and sat down on the floor. He made himself comfortable, crossing his legs and relaxing his shoulders. To anyone watching, it looked like he was giving up before even trying. "What is he doing?" someone in the crowd asked. "The human is afraid," a Natai voice called out. "He cannot even approach." But Velrissa said nothing. She was watching carefully, her golden eyes narrowed in thought. Shreth watched too. The Ikran's head tilted to one side, confused by this strange behavior. Usually when Natai entered for bonding attempts, they came forward with aggressive energy, ready for battle. This human just sat there like he was waiting for something. D1 breathed slowly and evenly. He let his body language speak for him. No threat, no challenge, just presence. He had used this technique with wild horses back on Earth, the ones that had been abused or neglected. You couldn't force those animals to trust you. You had to let them come to you on their own terms. Minutes passed. The crowd grew restless. Some people started to leave, thinking nothing would happen. But the Natai stayed, fascinated despite themselves. This was not how bonding was supposed to work. Shreth made a low sound, questioning. His wings folded slightly. The red glow of his neural tendrils faded to orange. He was still alert, still cautious, but less aggressive. The lack of threat from D1 confused him. Every instinct said to attack, but there was nothing to attack, just a small creature sitting peacefully. After 30 minutes, Shreth climbed down from his high perch to a lower one, closer to D1 but still at a safe distance. The Ikran's large eyes studied the human carefully. D1 noticed this from the corner of his vision but didn't react. He just kept breathing, kept projecting calm. "Impossible," Velrissa whispered. "Shreth never approaches anyone but me." More time passed. The crowd outside was completely silent now, pressed against the barriers, watching this strange dance between human and Ikran. Shreth descended to the floor. He circled D1 slowly, keeping a distance of about 5 meters. His claws clicked on the metal floor. His tail swept side to side, but the movement was different now. Less aggressive, more curious. He was trying to understand this strange creature that didn't act like prey or challenger. D1 finally moved. Slowly, carefully, he turned his head to look at Shreth directly. Eye contact was dangerous with predators, a direct challenge in most species. But D1 had learned that it was also how you showed respect, how you acknowledged another creature as an equal rather than an inferior. Shreth froze, their eyes met. The Ikran's pupils dilated, then contracted. For a long moment, neither moved. Then D1 did something no Natai would ever think to do. He lowered his head slightly, breaking eye contact first, a gesture of respect. Not submission, not dominance, just acknowledgement that this was Shreth's territory, his space, his choice. The Ikran made a sound that Dr. Park later described as similar to a cat's chirp, a noise of surprised interest. Shreth took a step closer, then another. His aggressive posture had melted away. His wings were folded neatly against his body. The tendrils on his skull glowed a soft blue color now, indicating calm curiosity. D1 slowly extended his hand, palm up, empty, offering nothing but himself. His heart pounded in his chest, but his breathing stayed even. Every instinct screamed danger, but every lesson he had learned about animals told him to stay calm, stay present, stay genuine. Shreth lowered his head toward the outstretched hand. His nostrils flared, taking in D1's scent. The Ikran was so close now that D1 could feel the heat radiating from his body, could see every scale and marking on his hide. One wrong move and those jaws could take his arm off. But Shreth didn't attack. Instead, he moved his head forward until his snout touched D1's palm. The crowd outside erupted in shocked voices. Even the Natai were stunned. This was not supposed to be possible. Bonding required combat, required proving dominance through strength. Yet here was a human who had done it through patience and respect. "May I?" D1 asked softly, knowing Shreeth couldn't understand his words, but hopping his tone carried meaning. He slowly stood up, moving with careful precision. Shreeth backed up half a step, alert again, but didn't flee or attack. D1 approached from the side, using techniques from horse training. Never directly from the front where he looked like a threat, never from behind where he might startle. From the side, where Shreeth could see him clearly, where the Ikran maintained control of the situation. His hand touched Shreeth's scales. They were warm and surprisingly smooth. The Ikran's muscles tensed under his touch but didn't pull away. D1 ran his hand along the creature's neck, feeling the power contained in that body, the deadly potential, but also feeling the rapid heartbeat, the nervousness, the uncertainty of this new experience. "You've been forced into bonds before," D1 said quietly. "Dominated, made to submit, but that's not what I'm offering. I'm asking for partnership." He moved alongside Shreeth's body, approaching the mounting position. The Ikran watched him with one large eye, tracking his every movement. The neural tendrils on the back of his skull moved faster now, sensing D1's proximity. They glowed brighter, shifting through colors. Dr. Park had said this was the crucial moment, when the Ikran would either accept the connection or violently reject it. D1 reached the mounting position. He could see the saddle-like formation on Shreeth's back where a rider would sit. He could see the neural tendrils writhing slowly, waiting for connection. He placed his hands on Shreeth's back, ready to mount. The Ikran tensed. A low growl rumbled through his body. This was it, the moment of truth. "Partners?" D1 asked. He pulled himself up onto Shreeth's back in one smooth motion. The moment he settled into position, the neural tendrils reached for him, drawn by his proximity. They touched the back of his neck where Dr. Park had applied special gel that would let the connection work despite his human biology. The world exploded into sensation. Suddenly D1 could feel Shreeth's emotions, his thoughts, his entire being. Fear, confusion, curiosity, but underneath it all something else. Relief. After years of being dominated, of being forced into submission, here was finally a mind that touched his with respect instead of conquest. The bond flared to life. Blue light spread from the connection point across both of them. Shreeth's wings spread wide and he roared, but it wasn't a sound of aggression. It was triumph. D1 gasped as his senses expanded. He could feel the air currents in the sanctuary. He could sense the positions of every object around him. His balance shifted to accommodate Shreeth's movements as if they were one being. "Fly," he whispered. And Shreeth launched himself into the air. Flying on Shreeth's back was nothing like piloting a ship. There was no cockpit, no instruments, no computer between D1 and the experience of flight. Instead, there was the powerful rhythm of wings beating the air, the flex of muscles beneath him, the rush of wind against his face. Through the neural bond, he felt everything Shreeth felt. Every shift in air pressure, every current and eddy, every subtle change in the sanctuary's artificial atmosphere. It was terrifying and amazing at the same time. They soared upward toward the high ceiling of the sanctuary. Shreeth's four wings moved in a complex pattern that D1's pilot brain recognized immediately. The Ikran was using different wings for different purposes, the upper pair for lift, the lower pair for stability and steering. It was more sophisticated than any aircraft D1 had ever flown. Below them, the crowd pressed against the barriers. Their faces were tiny and distant, but D1 could hear their voices echoing through the massive space. Shock, disbelief, wonder. The flight was rough at first. D1 had training for high-G maneuvers and zero-gravity combat, but this was different. He had to learn Shreeth's movement patterns, had to understand how to shift his weight to work with the Ikran rather than against him. Through the bond, he could feel Shreeth adjusting too, learning how this strange human rider moved and thought. They dove toward one of the large artificial trees, pulling up at the last moment with precision that made D1's stomach flip. Shreeth was testing him, pushing to see if this human could handle real flight. D1's combat pilot instincts kicked in. He read the movements before they happened, felt the intention through their bond, and moved his body in sync. Suddenly it clicked. Human reflexes and Ikran instinct merged into something greater than either alone. They banked hard to the right, threading between two perching platforms with barely a meter of clearance on each side. The crowd gasped, but D1 and Shreeth felt no fear, only the pure joy of perfect coordination. They climbed again, higher and faster. Shreeth roared and D1 felt the emotion behind it. This was what flight was supposed to feel like. Not the forced submission of typical Natai bonding, but true partnership. Two minds working as one. Through the neural connection, D1 understood things he had never known before. He felt how Shreeth perceived the world, processing information through senses that humans didn't have. The Ikran could detect magnetic fields, could sense pressure changes with incredible precision, could predict weather patterns through subtle atmospheric cues. It was like having a sophisticated sensor array built into his own nervous system. They were completing their third circuit of the sanctuary when alarms began blaring throughout the station. The sound was loud and harsh, cutting through everything. Red emergency lights flashed. Through the transparent ceiling, D1 saw something that made his blood run cold. A cargo ship, one of the massive freighters that brought supplies to the station, was tumbling out of control. Its engines were firing randomly, pushing it in erratic directions. It was headed straight for the sanctuary section of the station. Emergency, a voice boomed over the station's communication system. All personnel evacuate Sector 7 immediately. Collision warning. Impact in 90 seconds. The crowd below panicked. People pushed toward the exits, but there were too many of them. The barriers had been locked for safety during D1's bonding attempt. Security was trying to unlock them, but the override codes were taking too long. Through the ceiling, the cargo ship grew larger. Its hull was scarred and smoking. Whatever had gone wrong with its systems, it was completely out of control. If it hit the sanctuary at that speed, the entire section would depressurize. Everyone in this room would die. 60 seconds. D1's training took over. He was a combat pilot. He had flown rescue missions in Earth's orbital space. He had navigated through debris fields and pulled disabled ships to safety. This was what he did. But he wasn't in his fighter craft. He was on the back of an alien creature, connected through a bond he barely understood. Shreeth, he said aloud, knowing the Ikran would feel his intention through their connection. I need you to trust me. Can you do that? Through the bond, he felt Shreeth's response. Not words, but pure meaning. Trust went both ways. The Ikran had trusted D1 to make a bond without dominance. Now D1 was asking for trust in return. The answer came as a surge of determination and agreement. They dove toward the transparent ceiling. Below, people were still struggling to evacuate. Station security had finally overridden the locks, but the crowd was too large, moving too slowly. They needed more time. 40 seconds. D1 reached the ceiling and looked up at the approaching cargo ship. Its running lights blinked in distress patterns. Through Shreeth's enhanced senses, he could feel the ship's mass, its trajectory, its rate of spin. His pilot brain calculated intercept vectors and force requirements without conscious thought. It was impossible. They were too small. The cargo ship was too massive. But maybe they didn't need to stop it. Maybe they just needed to change its course slightly. We need to get outside, D1 said. There was an emergency exit port built into the ceiling, designed for Ikran riders to take their creatures out into open space when the sanctuary needed maintenance. It would take 10 seconds to cycle open. 10 seconds they didn't have. 30 seconds. D1 made a decision. Through the bond, he showed Shreeth what he wanted to do. The Ikran responded with immediate understanding. They climbed higher, faster. Shreth pulled his wings tight against his body, becoming a missile. They shot upward toward one of the ceiling windows. The transparent material was designed to withstand meteor strikes, but not from the inside. Shreth hit it with all four claws extended at the precise point where three panels met. The impact sent cracks spiderwebbing across the surface. Alarms screamed even louder. Emergency shutters started to descend, trying to seal the breach. But Shreth hit the weakened point again, and again. On the third strike, the panel shattered outward into space. They burst through into the vacuum. 20 seconds. There was no sound now, no air, nothing but the silent darkness of space and the tumbling cargo ship bearing down on them. Through the bond, D1 felt Shreth's discomfort. Ikrans could survive in vacuum for short periods, but they didn't like it. Their instinct was to dive back to safety. But Shreth trusted D1. He spread his wings wide, catching zero gravity, and moved toward the cargo ship. D1's pilot training guided them. He calculated angles and vectors, using Shreth's superior spatial awareness to position them exactly where they needed to be. The cargo ship's random thrust firings made it unpredictable, but through the bond, D1 and Shreth processed information fast enough to adapt in real time. 10 seconds. They reached the cargo ship's hull. It was spinning slowly, metal groaning from stress. D1 spotted what he needed, one of the ship's maneuvering thrusters, still firing sporadically. If he could redirect that thrust, just for a moment, it might push the ship's trajectory enough to miss the sanctuary. Shreth landed on the hull, magnetic claws locking onto the metal. D1 slid from his back and grabbed onto a maintenance handhold. Through their bond, they stayed connected, sharing thoughts and sensations. He pulled himself toward the malfunctioning thruster. 5 seconds. His hands found the thruster's manual override, a simple mechanical lever designed for emergency repairs. He pulled with all his strength, redirecting the thrust vector. The thruster's flame changed direction, pushing the cargo ship sideways. The massive vessel's spin altered, just a few degrees but enough. The cargo ship slid past the sanctuary section with less than 10 meters of clearance. Through the broken window, D1 saw the crowd inside looking up in awe and terror as the enormous hull passed overhead. Then the ship was passed, tumbling away into space. Station security ships were already moving in to secure it with tractor beams. D1 let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Shreth climbed back up beside him and D1 pulled himself onto the Ikran's back. Their bond pulsed with shared emotion. They had done it, together. They flew back toward the sanctuary. Emergency crews were already working on sealing the breach, but they cleared a path for Shreth to re-enter. The Ikran dove through the opening gracefully, back into the warmth and air of the sanctuary. When they landed, the crowd erupted in cheers. The sanctuary was chaos for hours after the emergency. Station security wanted statements. Engineers needed to assess damage. Medical teams checked everyone for injuries from the panic. But through it all, D1 sat quietly with Shreth in a corner of the sanctuary, maintaining their bond, feeling the Ikran's emotions settling from the adrenaline high of their rescue flight. The crowd had finally dispersed, with people returning to their quarters and duties. Only a few remained. Dr. Hae-Jin Park, who was scanning Shreth with medical instruments and muttering to herself about unprecedented neural synchronization. The human captain, who kept giving D1 looks that mixed relief with exasperation. And Valrissa. The Natai pilot stood several meters away, her golden eyes fixed on D1 and Shreth. Her expression was difficult to read, a mixture of emotions that her proud face tried to hide. She had been silent since they landed, watching everything with intense focus. Finally, as the last of the engineers left and the sanctuary returned to its normal quiet, Valrissa approached. Shreth turned his head to watch her, but there was no aggression in the gesture. The Ikran seemed calmer than D1 had ever seen him, even in recordings. "I need to understand," Valrissa said. Her voice was quiet, stripped of its earlier arrogance. "What you did should not be possible. Shrith is my sky brother. We have been bonded for 12 years, yet he responded to you like—" She struggled for words. "Like you were offering him something he had been missing." D1 stood up slowly, respectful of her distress. Through his bond with Shrith, he could feel the Ikran's conflicted emotions about Velrissa. Loyalty, yes. History, yes. But also something else. Resentment, disappointment. "May I show you something?" D1 asked. Velrissa nodded stiffly. D1 gestured for her to approach Shrith. She moved forward with the confident stride of someone who had done this thousands of times. But as she got closer, D1 stopped her. "Watch his body language," he said. "Really watch it." Velrissa frowned but paused. She looked at Shrith carefully. The Ikran was tense, his muscles tight. His wings were pulled in close to his body, a defensive posture. His tail swept in short, agitated movements. "He's always like this," Velrissa said defensively. "Ikrans are aggressive creatures by nature." "Are they?" D1 asked. "Or have they been made that way by how they're trained?" Through their bond, D1 asked Shrith's permission for what he wanted to do next. The Ikran agreed with something that felt like curiosity. D1 disconnected from their neural link, feeling a pang of loss as the connection faded. Then he stepped back, leaving space between himself and the Ikran. "Call him to you," D1 said to Velrissa, "like you normally would." Velrissa's jaw tightened, but she did as he asked. She made the clicking sound that Natai used to summon their Ikrans. She held out her hand in the commanding gesture that indicated a rider demanding their mount. Shrith approached, but every line of his body screamed reluctance. He moved slowly, his head lowered not in aggression but in submission. When he reached Velrissa, he stood still and allowed her to touch him, but there was no joy in it. No partnership, just obedience. Velrissa's hand froze on Shrith's scales. For the first time, she really saw what D1 was showing her. "He doesn't want to be here," she whispered. "No," D1 said gently. "He doesn't. He obeys you because he was forced to, because your culture demands dominance. But that's not bonding, that's breaking." Velrissa pulled her hand back like she had been burned. "The sky bond is sacred. It has been our way for thousands of years. We prove our strength and the Ikrans respect us for it." "They submit to you," D1 corrected. "There's a difference. On Earth, we learned that difference thousands of years ago. We had horses that we broke to our will and they served us, but they never truly partnered with us. Then we learned a better way. We learned to ask instead of demand, to offer partnership instead of dominance, to respect them as individuals with their own needs and feelings." He moved closer to Shrith again. The Ikran immediately relaxed, his body language opening up. Even without the neural connection, the trust between them was visible. "What did you do differently?" Velrissa asked. Her pride was crumbling, replaced by genuine need to understand. "I gave him a choice," D1 said. "I showed him respect instead of dominance. I let him come to me on his own terms. And I proved that I could be trusted to consider his needs as important as my own. When we went into space to deflect that cargo ship, Shrith didn't have to trust me. He chose to, because I had already shown him that I would never force him to do something that would harm him." Velrissa looked at Shrith, really looked at him, perhaps for the first time in years. "Have I been hurting you all this time?" she asked the Ikran. Shrith couldn't answer in words, but his body language spoke volumes. The tension, the constant alertness, the way he only truly relaxed when Velrissa wasn't trying to exert control. "Can you teach me?" Velrissa asked, turning back to D1. Her voice was raw with emotion. "Can you teach me how to truly bond with Shrith, not to command him but to partner with him?" D1 smiled. "Yes. But it will require you to let go of everything you were taught about dominance and control. It will require patience. It will require you to see Shrith not as a mount to be mastered, but as an equal to be respected." "I can do that," Velrissa said firmly. Then more quietly, "I want to do that. She paused, struggling with vulnerability. I always felt like something was missing from our bond. I thought it was my weakness that I wasn't strong enough. But it wasn't weakness. It was forcing strength where I should have been offering trust. Over the following weeks, Vara Station witnessed something unprecedented. Velrissa, the proud Nat-Eye warrior, learning from a human how to connect with her own sky brother. At first, other Nat-Eye mocked her for it. But then they saw the change in Shreeth. The Ikran's chronic stress behaviors disappeared. His movements became fluid and confident instead of tense and aggressive. And the bond between him and Velrissa deepened into something neither had experienced before. Other Nat-Eye began to take notice. A young rider named Jaiwan, who had human ancestry mixed with Nat-Eye blood, was the first to ask D1 for help with her own Ikran. Then another, and another. What started as a challenge became a cultural exchange that changed both species' understanding of what bonding meant. The Nat-Eye Council heard about these developments. After heated debates and careful observation, they extended an official invitation to Earth. They wanted human-animal trainers to come to their homeworld to teach this new way of bonding, not to replace their traditions, but to expand them, to offer their Ikrans a choice they had never been given before. D1 stood on an observation deck, looking out at the stars. Velrissa stood beside him, no longer hostile but genuinely friendly. Shreeth was perched nearby, and through the neural connection D1 maintained with the Ikran, he could feel the creature's contentment. "You changed everything," Velrissa said. "When you accepted my challenge, I thought I would humiliate humanity. Instead, you taught my people humility." "I just showed you what we've learned on Earth," D1 replied. "That partnership is stronger than dominance. That respect creates deeper bonds than force. That every intelligent being, no matter what form they take, deserves to be treated as an individual with their own needs and desires." Velrissa was quiet for a moment. "Your species is strange, D1. You come from what we call a death world, a planet so dangerous that it kills most species who try to visit. We expected you to be violent, aggressive, obsessed with survival and dominance. Instead, you show us compassion. You teach us gentleness. You prove that strength and kindness are not opposites." D1 smiled. "On Earth, we learned that lesson the hard way. We dominated our animals, enslaved them, broke them to our will, and it worked for a while. But then we discovered that when we offered partnership instead, we got something much more valuable. We got friends, companions, beings who chose to work with us because they wanted to, not because they had to. And now you offer that same partnership to the galaxy," Velrissa said. She turned to look at him, her golden eyes reflecting starlight. "The great powers of this galaxy have technology and weapons and ancient wisdom, but you humans have something they don't. You have the ability to see others not as resources or tools or threats, but as potential friends. That might be the most powerful thing of all." A message chimed on D1's communication device. He checked it and smiled. "The Nat-Eye Council just officially approved the exchange program. They're sending 50 young riders to Earth for training, and they want me to lead the program on their homeworld." Velrissa placed her hand over her heart in the Nat-Eye gesture of deep respect. "Will you accept?" D1 looked at Shreeth, feeling through their bond the Ikran's eagerness for this new adventure. He thought about all the Ikrans on the Nat-Eye homeworld who had never experienced true partnership, who had only known submission and control. He thought about the bridges this could build between humans and Nat-Eye, between Earth and the wider galaxy. "Yes," he said, "I'll accept, but only if you come with me. You understand both ways now, the old and the new. You can help translate not just the techniques, but the philosophy behind them." Velrissa's fierce smile returned, but it was different now. Not arrogant, but genuine. "It would be my honor, Sky Brother." They stood together in comfortable silence, human and Nat-Eye, looking out at the infinite darkness of space. Behind them, Shreeth made a soft sound of contentment. The challenge that had begun in hostility had become something far more valuable, a friendship built on mutual respect, and a lesson that would echo across the galaxy. Sometimes the strongest bonds are not forged through dominance, but offered through trust. Sometimes the greatest victories come not from proving your power, but from showing your compassion. And sometimes the species from the dangerous death world has the most important lessons to teach about gentleness, partnership, and the true meaning of strength. D1 had accepted Velrissa's challenge to prove himself as a pilot. In doing so, he had proven something far more important, that humans brought to the stars not just their technology or their resilience, but their capacity for empathy and their wisdom about the value of treating all beings with dignity and respect. And across the galaxy, that wisdom was just beginning to spread.